welcome to another episode of Thunderstruck, a podcast dedicated to looking at the greatest matches in the career of one Jushin Thunder Liger, as picked by each and every unique standalone guest of this series. My name is W.H. Park. I'm the host of this show, and of course, I also co-host the Post Perez podcast with John Pollock here at postwrestling.com, and I'm very excited about this episode. Joining me today is another host of a podcast here at postwrestling.com. He does the British Wrestling Experience with Martin Bushby and Jamesy. He is also the co-host of one of my favorite podcasts, the GRAPPL Spotlight, which he does with JP Houlihan and Joe Lemon. He is the one and only Benno. Benno, how are you today?
I'm very well. I was a big fan of you at your G1 series, so I'm made up to be here. You had the Brigadier of Brit Res in Martin. You had Ireland's greatest son in JP. I'm just glad I can join the crew.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. And I was saying to you off air, and I'll mention it for our listeners, is that, John Pollock, when he was talking about, the announcement of Thunderstruck on one of the, I think it was Rewind Raw. I forget, he was talking with Way about it, and he was like, I don't know who the guests are, but each show's gonna have a unique guest, and he's like, I hope there's one person he gets. I don't know if he's gotten that person. I hope he's on the list. And I didn't know who he was talking about, so when I did the show last time, I did the show with him, I said off air, I was like, who were you hoping I was gonna get? He's like, Benno. And I'm like, oh yeah, don't worry about it, he's on the list. He's like, yes. So there's a lot of pressure here, Benno, to have produced something that John's gonna really like listening to.
I was going to say, yeah, no pressure. We're going to have to hit all the high spots. We're going to have to talk about the bus. We're going to have to talk about, I don't know, what do you think John wants to hear us do? Fast and Furious, maybe? We need to get all the bits in, keep an audience of one.
Yeah, Wild Speed, mate. It's called Wild Speed here in Japan.
I love that. Like when you sent me those posters on Twitter of it was like Wild Speed, Tokyo Drift. It's basically Wild Speed all the way through, isn't it? I love it.
Sky Mission.
Euro Vacation was one, wasn't it? Euro Mission?
Euro Mission. The last one was called Ice Break.
Wow. So, it's very literal.
It's very literal. They do a lot of name changing of movies here in Japan. Not everything, but sometimes I'll see a movie listing when I'm like, what should I go watch this weekend? And I'm like, what's this movie? And then I click on the poster and I'm like, oh, it's I don't know, Frozen, and they call it like Cold Princess or some shit like that. I don't know.
Well, that's what we need to start calling the British Wrestling Experience now. I feel like Euro Mission. Now that we got Jamesy on, being from Ireland and not from the UK, I think that makes sense. I'm gonna have a word with the Brigadier of Brit Res.
You let the Brigadier know that. By the way, coincidentally, I'm gonna be meeting the Brigadier in January because he's coming here for Wrestle Kingdom week, and it turns out, coincidentally, I did not plan this, that we are staying in the same hotel. So it'll be myself, John Pollock, Wei Ting, and Martin Bushby and his wife.
Wow.
All staying in the same hotel. It's just really, I was like, by the way, are you staying in this hotel? He's like, yeah. Oh, so are we. He's like, oh, that's brilliant. I'm like, great. So we can have
that's awesome. I'm so jealous. Davey and Braden are going as well, aren't they? I think the whole gang's going. Except
I don't think they have the money. But
well. I think they can come with us next year.
I think Braden's still recovering financially from his trip 2 years ago, maybe.
Yeah. While Post was launching, it sounded like he was having the time of a lifetime. It's something I really want to do. My girlfriend's been to Japan a couple of times, and she's always saying we could go, and maybe I could go see, Wrestle Kingdom, and she could go off and do some touristy stuff. Don't think this year's going to work, but maybe next year we can all meet up.
Well, hopefully I'll still be here. It's up in the air, like when my inevitable departure from Japan is going to happen. It might be next year, might be 2 years from now, might be 3 years from now. I have no idea. But I do think it's in the cards. But yeah, back to John, I think we have to try to have a good enough episode where he might just listen to it at 1.25 speed instead of 1.5.
That's what you've got to hope for. That's the goal. I mean, I worry about people trying to listen to me. I know because I'm from Liverpool in England, I talk quite fast and probably quite funny for our Canadian and American listeners. So I try and slow down on the podcast, but even I can't imagine listening to me on 1.5 speed.
I can't imagine. I usually talk at 1.5, so I don't know what John hears when he's listening to our shows back. Who knows?
Wow. Someone will have to listen to us on 0.75. I think that makes sense.
I'll have to. Maybe we can make a request to John privately and just see what does that sound like, John. Anyways, we should get to today's topic, which is Jushin Thunder Liger. Now, Benno, you are a longtime wrestling fan, and I know you as someone who's an expert on the British wrestling scene, and like subsequently, I've discovered like what a big old school Ring of Honor fan you were. But I want to know more about like your fandom as it pertains to Japanese wrestling, and in particular to Jushin Thunder Liger.
Sure, yeah. I mean, for me, the reason I told the ROH show is like Liger was someone who kind of he'd drop in WCW events past, and yeah, I'd see him like when I used to get videotapes from the local video store back when they were a thing, a local video shop, and they'd have like early 90s WCW, and I get to see his matches with Flying Brian and his other odd appearances that WCW would put him in, and kind of use him randomly, and he always just stood out for me. Like him and Muto, as the Great Muto, were kind of they immediately jumped off the page as stars, and no matter how WCW presented them, you always knew, even me as a kid knew, these guys are big deals. Even when it got to like the mid 90s and WCW was using Liger in, what was it, Tequila on a Pole matches, and the whole Russo booking of Liger. I think he lost it, was it a tequila bottle that Juventud Guerrera used against Liger's head? In a WCW matches, is that right? Yeah. So I remember like that was as a kid kind of exposure to Liger. You just kind of knew in the back of your head that this guy's a big deal. And yeah, I mean, I'm someone who's gone back and watched the big All Japan stuff, gone back and watched all of the early 90s junior New Japan stuff, and kind of you get back into Liger through that route as well. And yeah, he's just someone who for me he's just over the years popped up. I've managed to see him twice in the UK, once in Reading against AJ Styles, and the other time for the Super J Cup for Rev Pro a couple of years ago. And yeah, for me he's been a big constant of wrestling fandom, both in Japan and over in the West as well.
So let's talk about like when he does come over to the UK. What is the response for him like with that audience?
Oh, he's an absolute hero. That's it. People recognize he's a legend. You get the classic theme, and people go to the feet. And yeah, it's no mistake that the first British J Cup that Rev Pro ran, they had him in there, and they put him over because he is such a big star. And it kind of establishes that cup, and yeah. People go absolutely crazy when he comes out. He could have a night off if he really wanted to, because his big spots are always going to get over, I think, to Western audiences, both in the US and in the UK. But he always puts the work in, and he always just looks happy to be there, doesn't he? He seems to lap it up when the British or the American fans go crazy for him. So yeah, he's always a big hero over here, and he's treated definitely the right way as the pro wrestling royalty that he is.
There you go. So coincidentally, we're going to talk about a match you picked that's not in Japan. It's in the West, but it's not in the UK. You picked a match from the United States, and please introduce this match. What match are we going to talk about today?
Well, we're going to, you said earlier, I was a big Ring of Honor fan in the mid-2000s. So for me, thought go off a little bit the beaten track. One of my, just a personal favourite Jushin Liger match is his first visit to Ring of Honor in 2004, a singles match against Bryan Danielson, obviously now known as Daniel Bryan. It was kind of, I think it had been half a decade since he'd been over in the US doing the WCW stuff and that silly stuff with Juventud Guerrera and Psychosis. And yeah, me being a big Ring of Honor fan in the mid 2000s, it was such a big deal that he was going out there to work for what was my favorite wrestling company at the time. They built it really well, like now, treated him like the legend that he is. And for me as well, it came at a time where, although I said earlier he does put the effort in nowadays when he's out abroad. This was, he's a little bit younger, so he's still able to maybe go, that extra step faster. And it felt like he had a good combination of kind of maybe Liger towards the end of the peak of his career, but, still looking strong and getting to go over to the US for a really receptive audience. And yeah, that's a dream match to anybody. Daniel Bryan and Jushin Liger, the fact that it really happened, and the fact that it happened in the midst of the boom period of probably my favorite wrestling promotion of all time. For me, it was a no-brainer as one to get on here and talk to you about WH.
So before we get into actual match itself, let's talk about your fandom Ring of Honor, because you put out on Twitter earlier that you were doing some research and you went back to the old Ring of Honor message boards, and you organized a very infamous bus trip for the Ring of Honor UK tour.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of my fault why Ring of Honor come back to Liverpool so much, because I was one of the. I mean, there was a couple of us. So there was my friend Paul who travelled out with me, and a couple of other people that I'd see out there. But there weren't many Brits travelling out to Ring of Honor in 2005, 2004, 2005, 2006. And I was going with an amount of regularity. When a handful of times, would stay with my friends in Wisconsin and mainly go to the Chicago shows, but sometimes I go to the New York shows. And I do remember Kerry Silkin coming up to me and kind of saying, you're from Liverpool, aren't you, Benno? And I was like, yeah, from Liverpool. And he was like, yeah, well, is that a really good wrestling town? And I was like, well, kind of, but like not really. And he was pushing me and kind of going, yeah, but there's going to be a lot of wrestling fans there, isn't there? That'd be like it's got to be, something of a hotbed of wrestling. And I was like, well, to be honest, like I don't know many at that time. I didn't know many fans of Ring of Honor from Liverpool. I didn't know many hardcore indie fans. And he looked really, really disappointed. And then a week later, they announced, Ring of Honor's coming to Liverpool. And they were doing a show there. It was their first UK tour. And I always feel like the fact that I was always an ever present at those Ring of Honor shows in that period, and the fact that I was probably buying so much merch and DVDs, it probably really looked like they had a spike in interest in the Liverpool area of England where I lived. And I think it was probably in reality just me and one or two other people. But they came over anyway, and through my they did really well on that first tour, and through my kind of connection with them, I was helping doing some local promotion of the show. I was such a big fan, I was willing to just traipse around and hand out flyers. I had no idea what I was doing. I think I went to a football game and handed out some Ring of Honor flyers, handed some out to friends and family. I probably wasn't the street team they were looking for, but because I was such a big fan, I got involved with that. And then eventually I kind of had the bright idea of, well, I'm helping with the promotion of the show. There are going to be a lot of fans like me who need to travel down to they had a show in Liverpool and a show in Broxbourne. And there'll be fans who, like me, want to travel down to Broxbourne, which is the other end of the country. I'll put on this bus trip. I put on the bus trip for fans. It ended up being a bus trip not just for fans, but also for wrestlers as well. Alex Shane spotted that I was putting it on, and ever wanting to save a quick buck, he got in touch with me, and we ended up with this weird bus trip, which was like a combination of fans and wrestlers, and some things happened on that bus trip.
You're very reluctant to talk about it on your own show, so I won't press you on this one. But it sounds like you had some promotional experience, Benno. So maybe to stave off the demise of BritRes, you should form Pro Wrestling Benno.
Yeah, I've got more sense than that, WH. I think you've got to be a certain guy if you're going to throw any money after wrestling. I remember in the mid-2000s having had designs on that. Maybe I could create my own UK Ring of Honor, but I think I'd rather keep that on EWR and TEW. That's my main experience of booking. I think promoting the shows and helping hand out the flyers, and I'd organised that bus trip where I actually met Jamesy for the first time, who does the British Wrestling Experience with me. Is probably the extent of my promotional skill.
Change your mind. That's that. Don't ever send Facebook messages to talent that are getting in trouble.
What was that? Sorry, mate, you broke off.
Oh, sorry. If you ever do become a promoter, don't ever send Facebook messages to talent that are causing controversy. That's all.
Yeah, always seems like a mistake, doesn't it? Deal with that stuff on the phone, I think, is probably my best advice for promoters.
So let's talk about Jushin Thunder Liger versus Bryan Danielson, the American Dragon, November 5th, 2004 in Ring of Honor. And what city is this in? I think it's in Chicago or Boston?
Night one is Revere, Massachusetts, I believe.
So I think they kept referring to Revere, Massachusetts as Boston because it's close enough. So
yeah.
So we start off the video, and this is on YouTube actually, and when I do the show description, I'll link to that official video on YouTube. But I was able to acquire my own copy of this show because I don't feel bad saying that because it's just for the for the express purpose of reviewing this match for the show. So we start off the video, and on commentary, is one Jimmy Bauer and CM Punk. And I completely forgot about Jimmy Bauer. And of course, like, let's explain who Jimmy Bauer is. Benno, please do the honors. Who is Jimmy Bauer?
Yeah, one of the worst kept secrets in Ring of Honor. Jimmy Bauer, aka Chris Lovey, who was always Gabe Sapolsky, the Ring of Honor booker, and now Evolve booker slash WWE agent, I think he is in NXT. Yeah, he never did a good job of hiding his real identity. I do remember, like, when I first started getting Ring of Honor tapes, like, he was originally Chris Lovey. And it was always like, did you know that's Gabe who books it? And then I think during a show once, he kind of came out in commentary and was like, listen, guys, I'm going to come clean. Chris Lovey isn't my real name. I'm going to be true to myself and go by my real name. My real name is Jimmy Bauer. And then he went by Jimmy Bauer. I think it was just to pop himself, really, even though we all knew that it was always really Gabe on commentary. And my God, was he a treat.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of like half and half about his commentary. I think because he's the booker, so he knows all the storylines, so he's able to get that across to the fans. But I just found his voice is really annoying, and like some of his mannerisms, they just drove me nuts. And I'll talk about that like later on in the match review. But what did you think about his actual commentary?
It makes it tough to watch back, doesn't it? I mean, I'll admit myself, like you said earlier about, getting your hands on this show, like the Ring of Honor haven't done a very good job of putting their old library up as far as on the website goes, and I think a big reason of that is because of the music. I wonder if some of it's how loud and unbalanced some of the commentary is. Like years ago, I've got I had pretty much every Ring of Honor show on DVD, and I've now got pretty much every Ring of Honor show on a hard drive somewhere, so I'm covered. But I don't go back and watch it as much as maybe I would, because I do think the commentary really does date it, and Gabe screaming, and I can barely talk, being from Liverpool, but mispronouncing words, like especially was a Gabe favorite. You're right, he get all the factual stuff in, but you could tell he was reading his notes at times, and he got a bit screamy. And I did love the dangerous call, as shitty as it was at the time, but it's kind of hard to listen back to. It does kind of date these shows a little bit, and I've got I'm split like you. I've got like this nostalgic kind of feeling when I hear Gabe commentary, and CM Punk was great on commentary with him, and he kind of carried the booth. But I don't know, it doesn't date particularly well. And I think when they eventually brought in Dave Prazak, and they had the likes of Mark Nolte, and I think the commentary was probably better than the Gabe Lev commentary that came at the peak of Ring of Honor.
Yeah, I always remember when Prazak came aboard, like, he was so subdued compared to like the commentary I would hear. Like, I was like from Smart Mark videos, like shows that he would do, like IW Mid-South, and I guess of course for his own Shimmer promotion. And then he'd get into Ring of Honor, and I'm like, wow, he's a little subdued. I think it took him a while to find his comfort level where he could just unleash his Prazakness and just go full bore Dave Prazak, which I was like, okay, this is good. Because I always thought Dave Prazak was probably the best play-by-play guy on the indies at that time.
Oh yeah, definitely. And he was always an obvious pickup for Ring of Honor. It was always strange that they didn't use him until they did, and then when they did use him, it was kind of, they used him with Gabe, and then he kind of took over more towards the end of the boom period of ROH, and obviously he was doing those TVs on HDNet. They probably should have got him in earlier, and I think if they had him, I think these shows would definitely age a little bit better as well.
Probably the best commentary is probably the Kobashi Joe match, because there's no commentary on that.
Yeah, I was at that show live. That was one of the shows I went to. That was a weird one. You remember the wrestling channel that they used to have in the UK? It was basically it turned into the UK Fight Network. They had like a live show over here, and they had a raffle, and the winner of the raffle would get to go to any Ring of Honor show live. And me being the big Ring of Honor fan, I bought literally one ticket and won the raffle out of like the couple of thousand people there, and managed to find myself with a free ticket to Joe Kobashi. So yeah, that's probably one of my biggest memories, being a fan of Ring of Honor, being live at that show. And you're right, yeah, that really did translate better over to the VOD, because it was with no commentary. I think a lot of even modern promotions, especially the British ones, could learn from that lesson.
Yes, definitely. So let's get to the match. So we start off with Bryan Danielson coming out, and Benno, it's amazing. He's wearing his cloak, the hoodie cloak, and he's coming out to Ospreay. I was just nostalgic. I get the goosebumps like watching just his entrance alone. Next, we see the familiar opening of Ikari no Jushin, of course, which is Jushin Liger's theme song. And Liger comes out, and the ROH faithful in Boston go nuts seeing this legend. Like you were saying before, like just gets an amazing response every time he comes out to a Western audience. The introduction are done by one Bobby Cruz, who is still with Ring of Honor, and the ref is Todd Sinclair.
Two of the ever presents of Ring of Honor. Both still there now, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. Like I imagine, like, you know, unless Ring of Honor closes, that Todd Sinclair's pretty much got a job for life there, and same with Bobby Cruz. Life, yeah. So Liger gets into the ring, and the fans in attendance throw streamers for him, trying to emulate Japanese fans. But the thing is like, here's the thing, Benno. New Japan does not allow streamers, so they're actually throwing. They're kind of inaccurate throwing streamers for a guy who works for New Japan.
Yeah.
And here's my problem with people who throw streamers at American shows or Canadian shows or UK shows.
Oh, good, I've got one too.
They're terrible. They're fucking terrible at it. No, seriously. There's actually an art and a technique. Like I've seen people at Cork and Hall like prepare their streamers. They're all color coded. Like, so I'll see like some guy like Jushin Liger, like his natural colors are like red and white, but people are throwing fucking orange and purple, and I'm like, who do you think is fucking wrestling today? It's not fucking like Nobuhiko Takada. It's fucking Jushin Liger. You know,
it's not that hard. It's not that easy to get your hand on streamers. You know, it's like I remember, like I went to Kobashi show, and we found a party shop, and just if they had streamers, we were happy, so we just grabbed whatever. Like my pet peeve was less the colors and more the timing. Like in American wrestling, it always feels like we should. The fans just desperately want to throw the streamers as soon as possible, and I feel like if we all just waited for the announcements and threw them then, it'd be a much better visual. But you always kind of get half the streamers once and half the streamers when they actually get announced. I feel like the American and European fans streamer timing is more the problem than anything. And yeah, maybe the technique's not great. I think we were all much better at throwing toilet paper for Jimmy Rave than we were throwing streamers.
Well, see. The problem with the party streamers, and that's the thing, like, you know, Japanese fans don't use party streamers. They use a special kind of ribbon, and they weight it, like, at the end. So it's not, like, going to hurt anyone, but there's some weight to it, so it carries a bit better, and it like, you know, unravels a lot better, and it looks amazing in Japan, and it looks like shit everywhere else. Everyone's just using party streamers. It's like, my God, this looks fucking terrible, you know? So anyways, that's just my pet peeve about the streamers. And yes, Benno, you're correct. Listen, if you're going to do streamers, okay, that's fine. Please do it when they announce the wrestler's name.
Yes.
That's when you do it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. I remember being at like that Broxbourne show I mentioned earlier, and me, Jamesy, and a couple of other people went to the local supermarket, and literally, rather than, I think people were throwing pink streamers for Jimmy Rave at the time, but we stocked up on about 50 packs of toilet paper and had to explain to the guy working there why we needed such toilet paper. And I will say, you know, I piled all this toilet paper into the venue, and there were people stealing toilet paper off me to throw at Jimmy Rave. But I think our timing was better then. I remember that being thrown at the right time. So maybe that's what it needs. Maybe a British audience, or for it to be toilet paper for us to get it right.
So you're saying that Western audiences are full of shit?
Hey, you're saying it.
I think you're implying it. I'm just giving voice to it. But anyways, let's get back to the match itself. So we get back to the match. The code of honor is followed. The match starts with some grappling and mat work with two of the best to ever, you know, do just pure wrestling. Like, I think a lot of times, like, what gets lost in the conversation with Liger is really how great of an actual technical wrestler he is.
Oh yeah, he's so good. And like a match, I think I'm so used to seeing kind of. I mean, I love Liger now, but getting to see him, you know, here a little bit younger and a bit more. He was so willing to go for it with Bryan and do that sweet science in the beginning, and kind of. I noted he got the surfboard early on with the dragon sleeper, a move Bryan would often do as well. He was well up for that side of things. He knew he was in there with. He treated Bryan like an equal in those early stages, which I loved, especially even on the handshake at the start. It felt like Bryan not being just some happy to be there mark, kind of establishing he's there on even footing by initially refusing the handshake and then giving it, and then exchanging in very even terms the technical side. It kind of meant, got to remember at this time, Liger's a legend and Bryan was still on the come up, even though many of us thought of him as the best in the world. I felt like it was a really smart decision to do that in the opening strides of the match. Let Bryan do a little bit more stretching and lean into his heel side, but mostly make clear that these are two of the best in the world and they're very much on even footing.
Definitely, I think Liger has been well known for being willing to put people over, as well as being like someone who has his finger on the pulse of modern wrestling. Like, I think he's very in tune with what's happening. Even to this day, I think he's aware this guy's hot, this person's like a great talent. I want to work with these people. So definitely evident in 2004 when he goes over to work with Bryan Danielson in Ring of Honor. So Punk on commentary is running down the history of Jushin Thunder Liger and talks about his weight training at this point in time, which accounts for his power game like that he kind of displays during this match, Benno.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he definitely looked the bigger of the two. And I thought the commentary did a good job of putting that over and putting over, Bryan's past in New Japan as well. Was that a shoot? Because there was a Bryan promo. I did end up watching the whole show, and earlier on the show, Bryan mentions all these wins that he's had in New Japan, and that it was just Liger was the one guy he hadn't beat. I wasn't closely following New Japan at that time, but that feels like bending the truth now.
No, well, he did work in New Japan at the time. He was in a tag team with Christopher Daniels doing the Curry Man gimmick, and they were the IWGP Junior Tag Champions at one point, and he had a lot of he was someone that they were very high on in New Japan at that time because of the way he wrestled. He had a singles match with Tanahashi for the U30 title. I don't know if you're familiar with that belt. U30 basically means under 30. It was for the young people in the company. If you can track down Tanahashi versus Bryan Danielson for the U30 title, watch it. It's amazing. This is before Tanahashi's a star, but you can tell what a great wrestler he will eventually end up becoming. And his chemistry with Danielson is just fucking amazing. So I urge people to go watch that match. I think you could probably find it. It's floating out there in the internet, I'm sure. We go back and to the match, and at this point, Danielson tries the surfboard on Liger, getting some heel heat for that, but Liger is able to power out of it and then applies the surfboard onto Danielson himself. From there, he then transitions to his beautiful modified Dragon Sleeper where he still has the surfboard, but the opponent's on the knees, and then he just reaches back and just draws their head backwards and applies a Dragon Sleeper. I love this move, Benno.
Yeah, me too. That's it. And it, like I say, it was a move they could both do, and a move that Bryan would do more and more in the years going forward too. Nice little, I felt like a nice little story point there to kind of show the mirror image of the two, and Liger showing this young upstart Bryan how it's done.
Danielson is able to escape by going for Liger's eyes. At this point on commentary, Benno, Gabe starts plugging the straight shooting interview with Jushin Thunder Liger that I actually have, and I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's kind of shit.
Yeah, it's with the translator, isn't it? It always sounded bad. That was the Ring of Honor model at the time, wasn't it? They bring in a big name and they do a shoot interview, so they kind of kept that model for Liger. I love on the commentary though, yeah, like you said, Gabe giving the hard sell, giving that number will be burnt in my brain forever, 215-781-2500, and he'd repeat it at he'd always do it every main event. He'd go into a pitch mode for Gabe. He was never quite Don West, but he did his best. But yeah, they never quite sold me on that DVD, to be honest. It didn't sound like the most enthralling watch.
It was terrible, Benno. I actually have it. I ordered it from their website. 215-781-2500. Someone please call that in the United States. If you're listening to this, I want to know if that phone number is still valid and who answers that phone number. So yeah, I hope we get him.
Yeah, somebody at Sinclair, maybe.
Okay, at what's your Twitter handle again, Benno?
Benson Richard E.
At WHPark9. If you call that number, please, and someone picks up, please tweet us and tell us who answers that phone. Anyways, from here, Danielson turns the tide of the match to his favor. Oh, sorry, I got ahead of myself. Liger hits a plancha on Danielson, who's on the floor, and then Danielson is able to turn the tide of the match to his favor with a series of strikes using uppercuts, chops, forearms and headbutts. Liger is sent to the floor himself by a big Danielson dropkick. Danielson follows Liger to the floor and continues his assault on Liger, including whipping him to the unique ROH steel barricades. Unique! They're unique, Benno. Like Jimmy Bauer said, these are the unique Ring of Honor steel barricades. What the fuck is he talking about? What's unique about this shit?
Man, when I used to make my trips out, the big reason I would want to be front row is so I could be one of those guardrail slappers at the front, making all of the noise, slamming on the guardrail. I don't know, the fact that it's got a big logo on it, the fact that it's a big metal plate. I did feel like it was a big part of like the Ring of Honor presentation. They even, when they came to the UK, they flew those over. That's how important it was. I don't know, as a proud ROH bot, I was a big fan of the guardrails, and anytime I got to slap them was a big occasion. And it was cool as well. It was cool seeing Liger do anything in the Ring of Honor kind of surroundings, but I did kind of add that note that getting to see Liger take guardrail bumps on those famous ROH guardrails, I thought that was kind of cool, and it showed how up for it he was.
Fair enough. But I gotta say, Gabe is very, very proud of them, just the way he effusively talks about. You know what? Let's get to the crowd. And it's amazing to me, Benno. Like, I'm looking at this crowd. No one's on a smartphone. No one is looking at a screen. People are taking pictures with actual cameras, including this one older gentleman who's using a disposable film camera. That's fucking awesome.
Most of my ROH pictures from that period, though, are on an old disposable camera. It was a different time.
Yeah, and it's so weird seeing like Bryan like flipping off the fans. But let's be honest, they probably deserve it. These are ROH fans. Like, like I was an ROH fan. I gotta say, probably watching the shows as I do, like, and I watch these shows and I'm like, wow, I would probably enjoy being in this audience, but probably I wouldn't, because there's probably a lot of assholes in this crowd. What about your own live experience, Benno? What is the asshole quotient in a Ring of Honor show at this time?
Yeah, I mean, especially these big East Coast shows weren't always the best, because like Ring of Honor were presenting, earlier in the show, they had CM Punk who was presenting as a babyface, and there was just a portion of that crowd that were wanting to boo him no matter what, and it killed like the big moments in his match. And I think he had the segment with Mick Foley the night before, and it was kind of that area, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Boston. It did have probably a greater quotient of dickheads, I would say. But to be honest, I was watching the show looking at that same front row as you and thinking, oh, I recognise him. There's Greg H. There's Spanky Dave. There's Green Lantern Fan. Thinking, God, these are all these people that I would meet at like the fan meet and greets before the shows and speak to. So I don't know, WH. Maybe I'm one of the dickheads. Maybe it's me that you're talking about.
We need to end this show right now. Forget it. I'm going to call John and say we're scrapping that whole episode, John. We'll have to get someone else. No. I've been to like Ring of Honor shows in upstate New York, and I've been to, of course, tons of shows in Toronto and the Greater Toronto area. So a lot of those guys didn't come up to those shows. As far as I knew, I never sat front row, so I can't tell you if I ever saw, Green Lantern Fan in person. Though I would love to have met Green Lantern Fan. So maybe we'll talk about Green Lantern Fan at the end of this review. Back to the match. Danielson hits the airplane spin on Liger and then hits a rolling slam, but misses a diving headbutt. Liger is able to hit a series of Shote palm strikes after missing his own diving headbutt. Liger hits a top rope Frankensteiner for only a 2 count. Danielson blocks another Shote with a beautiful dropkick to Liger's left arm. He then proceeds to work over that arm. So this match became a Jamesy special, Benno.
Oh yeah, James will be loving this. Hopefully, if he watches it back, he loves a bit of limb work. I love the that airplane spot into them both missing the Benoit headbutts. A nice little throwback to when you were allowed to pay tribute to Chris Benoit. I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed the massive response when Liger hit those big showtays.
Danielson hits a German suplex for a 2, but he follows up with my favorite move in his repertoire, at least back then, the cattle mutilation. I just love this move, Benno.
Yeah, he needs to bring that back. Every now and then he'll do it in a WWE match and it gets crickets because people just don't know. But I'm doing a Jamesy. I'm jumping up in my living room, loving it every time he gives us a throwback to that. What a great finish. Terrible name. I think he changed it to Arms Across America at one point as well.
That's right.
Don't know if that's any better. But still,
I like cattle mutilation. I think it's kind of like unique. It kind of creates this image that he's like kind of like slaughtering his opponent's shoulders and arms with that move. I kind of like it. So from here, so Liger's in the cattle mutilation. He doesn't submit. So Danielson goes for a cradle pin for another 2 count. He goes for another pin attempt. 2, a dragon suplex. 2. This is turning into like a Rob Van Dam or I don't know, like maybe a Lance Storm, Jerry Lynn special at this point. The cattle mutilation is put on Liger again, but Liger gets his foot on the rope, so he's able to like withstand the brutality of this move that most cows would have been killed from, Benno.
Just shows you the power of Jushin Liger, yeah. I'd love to see Bryan try that on a cow. I wonder if it worked.
I don't know. Maybe I mean, like they don't have shoulders, so like a human. Yeah. I mean, they have shoulders, I guess, but not like human shoulders, so it wouldn't work maybe. So
be tough.
He's a vegan, so he would never hurt an animal now. So it's unlike that.
Very true.
From here, Liger hits a beautiful brainbuster. He just gets him up. It drops him right down on their heads, but he's protecting them the whole time. He then signals for another Shote and connects. Liger goes for a Liger bomb, but Danielson kick. Just this incredible series of moves and counter moves that's just like, I kind of think it's a lost art these days. Like now it seems more like a dance, especially with like the top end of, like New Japan with like people like Okada and my favorite wrestler and Joe Lemon's favorite wrestler, Jay White. It doesn't seem as like natural. Like this seems like a wrestling match where people are like scouted their opponents and they're like, okay, I know what you're going to do. I'm going to counter for that. I know what you're going to do. You got to counter for this and so forth and so on. So I kind of miss this style of like finishing stretches in matches, Benno.
Yeah, it kind of felt more organic. That was a big note for me watching it being a 15-year-old match. Like you did have those big counters, but they didn't go into overdrive, and there wasn't I do love like the Okada wrist clutch stuff, but maybe they do it too much. And you're right, Jay White's one of the biggest offenders for the endless kind of finisher counters. But yeah, I think because it came right after that, they had like that period you mentioned then of Bryan getting quite a few near falls with roll ups and kind of making it believable that Bryan could grab the win at any point. I love that this kind of followed it, and you kind of got it looked like Liger was going to take us home, and we got to see Bryan just about get out of the powerbomb, but then get caught with the capo kick. You're right, it felt natural. It felt like Bryan knew the running powerbomb was coming, but he hadn't counted on the capo kick that could follow. It was just a great sequence of two masters, I'd say.
From there, Liger is able to actually hit the Liger bomb this time, but only gets a 2. So like Liger is definitely like, okay, you can kick out of my big moves because I believe you are the future of wrestling. And what do you know, Benno? He was right. Bryan Danielson would eventually become the future of professional wrestling on a large scale. At this point, Gabe is just going absolutely mental on the commentary. It's. I think this is the point where like I actually enjoy, where he's like his enthusiasm takes over the pitchman part of his personality, and he's just like loving what he's seeing on screen. Liger goes for his top rope avalanche brainbuster, and after a bit of a struggle, he finally hits it for the 1, 2, and 3. So an amazing finish. He busts out like his super finisher. Kudos to Bryan Danielson for taking that move. Like, because I don't know too many people, like, not that he, would have much of a choice, at this point in his career, but it's a big ask to think, okay, we're going to be on the top rope. You're going to lift me up in a vertical suplex on the top rope, and then you drop me on my head, and you're going to protect me the whole time. Okay, let's do it. But it's Jushin Liger.
Yeah, that's it. It's only fair. I think a big part of it's like by design, isn't it? Like you said, they gave Bryan that big kick out that kind of, even in loss, he got to look strong, and it took a super brainbuster to beat him. I think, Bryan's obviously, Ring of Honor's guy at this period, and, we would maybe a couple of years later go on to properly be that. But if he's going to be losing to, the outside star, biggest star as he is as Jushin Liger. I like that as a nice thing, although, Liger was always going to go over. He had to do something drastic to beat Danielson, and it gave, the match was very good, but it kind of, I'd forgotten this was the finish, and it was a nice big punch at the end of the match to maybe even take the match up another notch, making its biggest bump and its biggest move be the finish. Imagine that, eh? But yeah, again, two masters, so it made sense for me, and yeah, definitely gave Bryan something.
And of course, you referenced this earlier, Ben. For this move, Gabe yells out his trademark "dangerous" call like he was calling a 19 from like Budokan Hall. I got to be honest, I fucking hated when he did that. I found it so annoying.
Oh, I loved it. I loved that and the crash and burn dangerous. That was another one he'd do when people would mess up a spot. It was this catchphrase he was endlessly trying to get over that maybe didn't quite get over to the level he wanted, but it gives me a bit of a nostalgia, so I like it.
What reminds me of that, like in current wrestling, is Kevin Kelly's Destino call, which I absolutely despise when he does that, because for me, like, I think this is what I have a problem with, like, Kevin Kelly doing that call and Gabe doing the dangerous call. It's like they're trying to emulate, like, parody Japanese announcers, and I don't feel my personal feeling on this is, and granted, I'm probably an outlier in this. I'm probably on an island about this, and that's fine. I don't expect other people to agree with the opinion, but to me, it just feels like they're kind of making fun of the way Japanese announcers call matches, and it's like, look, you guys are that much better. It's just a different culture. It's like cultural relativism, that they're projecting onto this. And I don't know, like, I studied anthropology in university, so like these kind of things like are always percolating in the back of my mind, and I'm just like, yeah, that shit, when you call it Destino, fuck both of you. Anyways, that's my rant over on that. Anyways, the match is over, and of course, in the front row, across from the hard cam, is someone we referenced, Benno, GLF, Green Lantern fan. Of course, the first thing he does as soon as this match is over, stops his stopwatch, and then he starts clapping. It's amazing.
Hey, that's the man we've got to thank for the cage match having the correct times for these shows. You always need a man with a stopwatch in the crowd. A man after John Pollock's own heart. I knew Green Lantern fan a little bit in this period. Like, I'd meet him at like some of these shows, and we always got on. And then I think we were friends on Facebook. And a couple of years later, after not speaking to him for a while, I thought it was his birthday on Facebook. I wished him a happy birthday. And then the next day, I noticed he deleted me as a friend on Facebook. So I was like, you know what? I used to be a fan of Green Lantern fan, and now I'm going to join in with everybody else who called him a dickhead.
Wow. He got a lot of hate on like all the message boards, like on DVDR. I don't know if he was ever active on the F4W message board. I'll have to ask Alan Farrell about that. But he would just like put out the most inane posts. Not that we should, like judge someone like that. Though we're in the era of wrestling Twitter at its height of toxicity. But I don't know, like, just for me, like, I never had a like actual problem with Green Lantern fan on message boards. I just like, whatever. He has an opinion. He's entitled to it. But then I'd see him at shows, and he's just like comes across as like he's always standing up. You know what? Like, he's like standing up. And it's like, dude, you're in the front row. You don't need to fucking stand up. There's someone behind you. Show some consideration for that person, please. Like, if everyone else is standing up, it's okay. But there are points where no one else is standing up, only him. And it's just like, I'm not a big fan of fans who, kind of behave that way, Benno.
No, that's it. Yeah, you got to think about the people behind you, and I think a lot of that's by design as well. I think Lantern fan was, again, a fan with a gimmick is always going to be wanting to maybe get a bit of attention on them, and always wearing the Lantern jersey and stuff. I think even though we got a lot of heat from people, I think he loved the heat. I think he was well into it. I just remember there was a time, like one of the New York shows I went to. I think I was supposed to be. I think I'd arranged through the ROH message board that I was going to be staying at his house. But again, he binned me off for, I think Jack Evans and Teddy Hart were staying with him instead. So I had to go and find an alternative arrangement. So maybe I shouldn't defend him so much. Maybe he is the heel that everyone talked about him as.
Okay, wait a sec. So you might have had a chance to stay overnight in the same house as Teddy Hart and Jack Evans. I'm trying.
I regret it every day.
Trying to imagine what that would have been like for you, Benno. Like, do you think about that? It's like, what would have happened if I got to witness that in person?
Oh, one of the great near misses of my life, to be honest. Yeah, I should have still gone through with it. So that's fine. Me, Jack, Teddy, his cats. Could have had the whole little party. Instead, I think I slept on the floor at Grand Central Station. That was my alternative plans, and I could have been partying with Teddy Hart and Green Lantern fan. What a miss. You know what? That's one of my biggest regrets in wrestling now that I think about it.
I bet they destroyed his place. I bet you that's what happened.
Oh yeah, nailed it.
Fucking weed in there or something. I don't know. So back to the match. The crowd is giving this a standing ovation. Obviously, of course, it's a great match. The code of honor is followed afterwards, and they plug the next night. There's going to be a big tag match. Benno, what's the tag match the next night with Liger and Danielson?
Yeah, it's kind of weird the way they do this. I understand why, but they did the same with when Kiboshi came over and I was at those shows. Like they had the big singles match on the first night, and then the following night you got like the dream tag team situation. So it was Liger and Samoa Joe against Danielson and Low-Ki. And Low-Ki was right in the middle of his Gangster Key Rottweilers gimmick at this point, so it was a bit of an odd tag team part for Danielson. You'd probably imagine normally in like wrestling, the way wrestling would normally work, the tag would be night one, and then night two I think they had a much bigger crowd. It was in New Jersey the night two. You'd imagine that would be the big singles match, but I think Gabe was always wary of kind of giving away the first contact between Liger and Danielson in a Ring of Honor ring in a tag match, and the same with Joe and Kiboshi. So he put the singles match on night one and the tag on night two. But yeah, it was a big part of the weekend, this happening as well. I thought that was a really good match, and allowed them to sell another lot of those lovely DVDs with those the great white covers. I don't know if you've seen them, like the cartoon style Weekend of Thunder covers. They were great as like a little 2-pack and kind of gave them a bit more of the money's worth with having Liger.
So I have an entire collection of Ring of Honor DVDs. So when Ring of Honor started, I was one of the first people on board. I have VHS tapes of like the first 5 shows, and then they switched to DVD. I have every DVD from the first show up until probably the Tyler Black title reign, and then I think that's when they started going on HD, and I just like stopped. I was like, okay, I started buying them like automatically, and I just never watched them. And I just like, this is a complete waste of money. Like I can probably get these on like other ways and save myself. And I felt at that time like, you know what? I gave these guys so much money in terms of DVDs because they were like, what, 20, 25
Oh, yeah.
Get a bit of a discount. But still, it's like, you know what? I've done my due diligence. I've gone to live shows. I buy T-shirts. Like, if I want to take a bit of a break from buying official DVDs and just watching them another way, that's, this is before the internet too. So, like, you can guess maybe what I'm talking about. I'm not incriminating myself. I'm going to take the fifth on that. But one thing I wanted to talk about was, like, actually skim through a lot of it, but I would stop at certain points. I got to ask you, it's unrelated to this match, Benno, but there's a point where, like, they're doing this angle with Homicide. He's part of the Rottweilers, which is him, Low-Ki, Julius Smokes, and of course, like, Rocky Romero and Ricky Reyes, the Havana Pitbulls. And there's a point where, like, I think it's after the Homicide match, this fan runs in to attack Homicide, and the Rottweilers just beat the shit out of him. Do you remember, was this legit, or was this an angle? I can't remember.
I remember at the time maybe thinking it could be legit, but watching it back, I think it was an angle. They were going hell for leather on this quote unquote fan, but there were a couple I noticed, like, just on rewatch, the Pitbulls, Reyes and Romero. Romero, by the way, looks like a completely different man, doesn't he? He's a handsome bloke now, but my God, back then, when he was younger, he was Stone Cold Fox. But like watching them two they pulled their strikes a little bit on this fan and worked it a little bit, and it went on a bit too long for me. I loved Low-Ki jumping out of absolute nowhere to just get himself a little piece of the fan as well. But yeah, this was during the period where they were like, Homicide was like part like work break guy, part like the bit of New Jack to him in that he would use weapons and be a bit of a crazed maniac, and they were trying to get like the Rottweilers over as like this dangerous act, and Homicide over as this dangerous guy. I know there have been real incidents in the past with fans, including Homicide and Low-Ki, so I think they were playing off that really and trying to create that danger element. But it was a well done angle after kind of a throwaway Homicide multi-man match.
If I fell for it, it must have been good, because like I was like, they really leg into this dude. Is this a work? Is this? I'm not sure. I can't remember like what was happening on the message boards at this time, but like I rely on your crack memory or your crack research here, Benno, to tell me like what was happening during this particular match. But final thoughts on this match between Danielson and Liger.
Yeah, for me, one of my favorites. It's two of the best of all time going at it. It's funny, like in this period, Bryan wasn't really my guy in Ring of Honor. I was more of a CM Punk fan, more of a Homicide fan, more of a Joe fan. Maybe later on in his Ring of Honor run, I was really into Danielson, especially in his WWE run. But going back and watching it, I loved it at the time, but maybe I didn't even appreciate it much at the time. I mean, it's not a 5-star match by any means. It's just a really tightly worked, nice match between, like I say, Danielson on the come up, moving into the prime of his career, Liger maybe at the tail end of his, but still able to go. And yeah, one of those matches where there just isn't a wasted motion. There's no blown spots to be seen here. There's no excess to be seen here. Everything in the match means something. It was well worked. It was tidy, and the crowd was maybe a little bit smaller than you might have imagined. There were a lot of empty spots in the crowd, but the crowd were loud for it and were bang into it, and it meant a lot for Ring of Honor at the time as well. They'd had Muta over previously. This was kind of their next like big name they got over in Liger, and it'd be followed by the likes of Kenta Kobashi, Kenta, the Dragon Gate guys, etc. But for a promotion that was very much on the come up in 2004, it meant a lot to have Liger here in his first US appearance in half a decade. So for me, it was a historical one for Ring of Honor, and just a really nice gem of a match that maybe has gone under a lot of people's radars who might not even know that Daniel Bryan and Jushin Liger have had a singles match in the US.
I mean, for me, I'm gonna just echo your sentiment on that, and I really enjoyed this match. I don't think it's like an elite level match or anything like that, but it is a nice kind of footnote in the career of Liger. Like, he's on the decline, as you're saying. He's on the uprise. Like, he's early in his career, but like you can tell even at this point, like he's what, like 3-4 years in the business, like in Ring of Honor, and he's just like so good at this point in his career. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy that he did end up reaching the pinnacle of the industry, becoming the WWE champion and like headlining WrestleMania and like in a pretty popular angle, and just beating like 3 huge stars in Triple H, Batista, and Randy Orton for the belt. Of course, he didn't have a sustained run, but I think he's done well for himself since. But I do think it's a perfect example of like how generous Jushin Thunder Liger is for this guy that he's heard of, and he's creating a buzz for himself. But Liger is under no obligation to do anything for this guy, but he's bumping for him. He's like, he's taking a lot of moves. He's letting him kick out of his big signature moves. So that's really telling of like the generosity of Liger and how well he understands how to get people over. Like, one thing you'll look at in his career in Japan, and like when he does excursions to the West, is like he understands how to get people over and like who to put over. He's not just going to do it for anyone. He's going to do it for the right person at the right time. And I think the decision here, like he wins the match, but like what he gave Bryan was enough to get Bryan over and to get enough heat for Bryan to be able to say, like, listen, I went toe to toe with a legend in Jushin Thunder Liger. So yeah, just a match worth going out your way to see. Benno picked this match, and I was really happy that you did, because I hadn't seen it for a long time. So it's out there on YouTube, on Ring of Honor's official website, if you want to check it out. But yeah, any final thoughts on, I don't know, maybe we'll wrap things up here. But Benno, before we go, please plug the various projects you work on these days.
Sure, yeah. I do the British Wrestling Experience, as you mentioned at the top of the show, for Post Wrestling with Martin and Jamesy. As I say, met Jamesy through my Ring of Honor fandom, so there's a nice full circle link back there where we cover British Wrestling every other Wednesday on postwrestling.com. And as you mentioned too, I'm the host of GRAPPL Spotlight with Joe and JP, where we used to be a BritRes podcast, but we've kind of, now that we're the official podcast of GRAPPL, we cover all kinds of things from the US, Japan. We did a G1 series over the summer. We're doing a lot more New Japan coverage that maybe listeners to this might enjoy, but we cover pretty much everything. AEW, BritRes, soaps, other assorted nonsense that's happening in our daily lives. That seems to be the stuff that people really enjoy. So maybe listen for that more than the wrestling tapes, our old GRAPPL Spotlight.
Well, as you well know, Benno, because I stand on Twitter, I am a huge fan of the show, even though I don't understand what maybe like 40% of what you're talking about, like the British soaps and football players and things like that. But there's enough stuff. I do understand maybe like 70%. I just wish some of you were like fans of Doctor Who and James Bond and talk more about that. Then I'd be like, oh, I understand what they're talking about. As far as that goes.
We'll have to throw some of those references in for you.
I would appreciate it. But yeah, definitely check out Benno on Twitter. We gave out your Twitter handle before. Check him out on the British Wrestling Experience here at postwrestling.com, and of course the GRAPPL Spotlight, which I wholeheartedly endorse. It's one of my favorite podcasts. And just so I'm going to spoil things for people out there, I am going to have JP and I'm going to have Joe Lemon on this series, Benno.
Wow.
I'm so looking forward. I've talked to JP before, so I've talked to you now. I am so excited to talk to Joe Lemon. I'm just waiting for him to pick a match, and then we're going to schedule a date to record, and I'm just like, come on, Joe, pick a good match. Let's talk about stuff. But probably it'll be like 40 minutes of just us shitting on Jay White. It could be that. Just so people know. You've been forewarned.
That's what you should do. Just a special events. Just the anti-Jay White show. Just go scorched earth on poor Jay White. I think there could be money in that.
Maybe we'll have to start up a special Joe Lemon WH Park Patreon for that. We'll see. But I want to thank all the listeners for checking us out and all the positive feedback we've been getting. Benno, thank you so much for doing this. This is like our first time talking. I thought it went really well. I really enjoyed talking with you. We got to do something again in the future. And so for all the listeners, on behalf of Benno, I'll say thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you on the next episode. Goodbye.